Alas, the governments of many countries around the world, including many free countries, do. In fact, as we know from my Bill C-11 odyssey, the Canadian government recently gained the same powers over the internet that they currently have over television. If you are eager to bypass government control of your online experience, then a VPN like Surfshark is an essential tool. When you use a VPN, digital information about your location is swapped out with a virtual location of some other place, thereby tricking the internet into thinking you're somewhere where you ain't. Surfshark has servers in over 100 different countries, giving you the ability to fool the internet into thinking you are just about anywhere, even Bosnia. I wonder how censored their internet is over there. Well, with Surfshark, you can find out. The Surfshark app can be used on an unlimited number of personal devices, and they have the cheapest monthly rate of the big three VPN providers. If you are interested in getting a taste of what a truly free internet is like, why not hop down to the link in the thing below and use the promo code JJMCC for an amazing 3 months free when you get a 24-month subscription. And if you are not completely satisfied, they also have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Surfshark, secure your digital life today. So the main rebuttal that I think needs to be made is just that the supposedly bad US state flags embody an important part of American cultural heritage that deserves respect. One of the most common slurs used to describe the bad American state flags is seal on a bedsheet. This refers to the fact that many of these flags simply consist of a blue field with a complicated crest in the middle. Seal on a bedsheet, or the even less subtle SOB flag, are terms that were popularized by Mr. Ted Kaye, an official within the North American Vexillological Association, who we will talk about a bit more later. Now, this style of flag is indeed very common in America, with at least half of the 50 states, representing about half the US population, having seal on a bedsheet style flags. But before we start hating, perhaps we should pause for a moment and ask why this is. To begin, what even is a seal anyway? So seals, in the sense of things that look like this, are an ancient tool historically used by important people and institutions to indicate that they have given official approval to something. In their earliest form, a seal was a sort of stamp that could make an impression on a clay disc that was then used to bind up a parchment document to prove who it was from. They sealed the document, get it? But clay seals were heavy and awkward, so people started using stamps on blobs of beeswax instead, and attaching the flattened blob to a paper document. Though today we often imagine these wax blobs as being stuck to the paper itself, historically they'd just as often be hung from the bottom on little dangling ribbons, as you can see here on the Magna Carta. This allowed the blobs to be stamped on both sides with two different designs for greater security. And that mattered because security was a big part of the purpose of this tradition. Written signatures were easy to forge, but an elaborate indentation in a blob of wax was considerably tougher. This also created an incentive to making seals with very elaborate and precise designs, since those were harder to forge as well. The British were very big into this tradition, with the kings of England having very large and grand seals used to signify royal approval. The king's royal governors in America all had seals of their own as well, often with the king's crest on one side and some sort of illustration of the specific colony on the other. According to this book, seals were such a big deal in 18th century American political culture that the founding fathers considered the creation of a distinctly American seal a much more pressing matter than the creation of an American flag. Congress took no action upon the design of the flag when independence was declared on the 4th of July, 1776. However, on that auspicious day, a committee was established to design an appropriate seal for the new republic. The members of the Congressional Congress shared a culture that included familiarity with British heraldry and the use of an official seal of state in validating government documents. Almost immediately upon declaring themselves independent, they appointed the prestigious committee of John Adams, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson to devise a suitable seal. Since the use of an official flag would at this time have been limited to state buildings, forts, and the limited number of American ships at sea, perhaps no one considered it a crucial point worth troubling over immediately. Clearly, the question of an appropriate flag did not rate the attention that the question of a seal did. This relative indifference to the American flag is one of the main reasons why the design of these stars and stripes varied so much until the latter half of the 19th century, when flags became a much more standardized and commercialized, mass-produced object. But the design of the Great Seal of the United States has been unchanged since its initial approval by Congress in 1782. And it's worth noting that Congress was even moving pretty slowly on this front compared to the states. New Hampshire, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Pennsylvania all designed their own state seals immediately after independence was declared in 1776. Delaware and Georgia followed soon after in 1777, New York in 1778, Virginia and North Carolina in 1779, and Massachusetts in 1780. A few of the original states, like Connecticut, Maryland, and Rhode Island, continued using their royal seals with only slight modifications. As new states joined the US in subsequent decades, making a state seal was always one of the very first things they did as well. To this day, most state governments still have an actual physical stamp of their state seal, and their constitutions still require certain official documents to be sealed. Although these days it is usually done with one of those pressure stamp things, or just a sticker, rather than blobs of wax. Check this out. It is a proclamation of Wildfire Awareness Month, sealed by 8 different governors. In contrast to state seals, which may be hundreds of years old, state flags are a vastly newer idea. Most of the older states went a century or more without ever adopting a flag, just because it wasn't considered that important. Like this guy said, for much of American history, people mostly associated flags with boats or war, so not exactly relevant for a small landlocked territory like, say, Colorado. Around the turn of the last century, however, the idea that a flag was simply a decorative symbol that anyone could use for anything became more mainstream, and this also happened to be the time when a bunch of states were celebrating historic anniversaries of one type or another. The early decades of the 20th century thus saw a bunch of state legislatures adopt state flags for the first time, with many of these flags designed to honor their oldest and proudest state symbol, the state seal. In sum, the decision to have a seal on a state flag isn't simply a lazy or ill-considered design choice. It instead reflects a conscious desire to celebrate what have historically been one of the most important symbols of authority and identity in American civic culture. State seals tend to be very rich in symbolism about that state, with elaborate and often highly metaphorical representations of that state's landscape, industry, and ideals. This does make them visually complicated, but even then, the complexity of their designs is not frivolous, but consciously evokes ancient traditions of seal making that America inherited from England. So I think a case can be made that so-called seal-on-a-bedsheet flags are actually very meaningful American cultural objects. But are they still bad flags? Well, this leads me to rebuttal point number 2, which is that there are no such things as flag rules. The popular educational YouTuber CGP Grey recently made what I consider to be a rather tendentious video bashing US state flags, and he begins it by confidently declaring a set of 5 rules that all good flags should conform to.
1. Keep it simple, something a child could draw. 2. Make it distinct at a distance. 3. Colors or fewer. 4. Symbols, have them. Your colors and what you design with them should mean something. 5. Words on a flag, the ideal number is 0.
He doesn't credit these rules to anyone, which again, I would say just reinforces this idea that the rules of a good flag are objective and self-evident, almost like the laws of nature. But in reality, these rules, which CGP Grey is hardly the first to cite, are actually traceable to a single guy, our old friend Ted Kaye. In 2001, Ted made a pamphlet called Good Flag, Bad Flag for the website of the North American Vexillological Association that purported purported to offer the distilled wisdom of the world's leading flagspurts. And it was enormously popular and influential, and today you will see TED's 5 basic principles of flag design repeated endlessly, especially in the context of criticizing the many American state flags that supposedly violate these rules. The big problem with TED's 5 rules, however, is that they presume flags are a sort of tool that exists to perform a very precise functional purpose. And I'm really not sure that that's true. I mean, certainly when it comes to state flags, their only real function is to be a decorative